Welcome to episode 83 of the Dare to Dream podcast. My name is Vincent Van Patten,
And I am Gregory Russell Benedict.
and this is a podcast that will inspire you to take the first step on your hero's journey. And Greg, that is what we're going to be talking about today. The hero's journey, made famous by Joseph Campbell. And what's the book called?
His book is The Hero with 1,000 Faces. It's quite
That's why
dense.
I keep you around. And so the hero's journey is very important to us because it's the classic story, Star Wars. Luke Skywalker, he goes from the ordinary boy on that godforsaken planet. He embarks on the journey of his life, and it's adventure, and it's kind of this innermost desire that we all have to live an adventurous life that is truly exciting and meaningful and unique to each of us.
Yeah, and the hero's journey is across pretty much every movie and book you've ever read. Like you mentioned, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Spider-Man, The Lion King. And for me, it's really summed up in that question of, is this it? It's when you take a look at your ordinary life, what you're currently living, and you look around and you ask, isn't there more to life? That's where it starts. The ordinary world and the
For
call to
sure.
adventure.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to start with and what we're going to go through today. We're going to delve into our own origin stories, what brought us here, why we're doing this now, what gives us any sort of credential to be speaking our minds to you, beautiful people, and where we are in the journey. And hopefully it can inspire you to take that first step on your own hero's journey, or maybe just get some clarity of, maybe you're being called to something, you don't see it. Maybe you're ready to embark and you're feeling it and you're afraid, because fear is definitely a big factor in all of this. And it's all about overcoming that fear and having the adventure of your life.
Yes. And another note before we jump in is that the hero's journey is iterative. So it's not like you go through it once and then you're done.
Uh,
And it's also really messy. I think
we
it
love big
was,
mountains.
we love big messes. I think it was the episode with Dane Sanders where he mentioned that you're not on your hero's journey until everything's going wrong. There's chaos. You're in the mud. You're upside down. You're blindfolded. You can't see.
That's our favorite place to be.
That's when you know it's really beginning. There's some quote that's, if you can see your path, you're not on your path. Something along the lines of that.
Right. That's a good one. All right, bud. Well, let's dive in with you first. So the ordinary world, walk us through that.
Yeah, and I think the framework or structure we're going to use here is we're going to go through the steps of the hero's journey, and both Vinny and I will each share where we were in that step, what was going on, and we are also not done. We have not completed the hero's journey. We are very much driving that bus at full speed, sometimes not knowing where we're going.
Crossing the bridge, we might, fall off. We'll see what happens. But we're going. And yeah, we're in this thing, we're all in this thing together. So we are the students, maybe the teacher, but mostly the student. So let's go.
For me, the ordinary world was working in finance. It was wanting to be successful in private equity, just have my fancy dress shirts and my Lululemon dress pants and make money for the sake of making money. And that's where I found myself after college. I was just plugging away, working, studying for this big financial test called the CFA. And I don't know what else to share about the ordinary world except that I was pretty unsatisfied with it from the beginning. I remember pretty much as soon as I graduated from college and started my first job, I wanted to make an impact. I really wanted to like change the world. And yet I found that through the monotony of the jobs I was in and my lack of experience, I just didn't have the tools or capacity to start making that change.
Right. And that's a place where most of us are in, the ordinary world where everything seems pretty ordinary. You look around, people are somewhat satisfied, but deep down they're not. And you don't really have the tools. Maybe you just graduated from college and you just don't really know what you love yet, or just what could be. And it's very difficult to know which direction to move in until, maybe unless you're really called to something. And we'll get into that step. Um,
Yeah,
so
and I think an important thing to note here is that the ordinary world is exactly what school and your parents and society prepare you for. Like that is the mold that you're supposed to fit into. And so that's where everyone starts. And it's not a thing to beat yourself up about or to be upset with that you're there. That is literally the normal standard and the almost like success measure of if you went through school well and you got a good job and all of that.
yeah, how well do you fit into the ordinary world?
Yeah.
You hit all the marks, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. But this is, if you really want to live the unordinary life, which I think all of us do, but we don't know how.
And before we jump over to you and hear about your ordinary world, I think I would challenge that statement that everyone wants to live an unnormal or extraordinary life. I think there are some people who are really drawn to these alternative stories of success where it's the travel the world, start your own thing, entrepreneurial journey. And then there's other people who like their dream is to be a CFO. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted to just work my way up the corporate ladder at first.
Mhm.
So it's not for everyone. The Dare to Dream podcast is not for everyone. And that's what makes it beautiful.
True. I would also challenge that the you can live an unordinary life in the ordinary world. You could be a
Mm,
CFO and go on your own hero's journey just to overcome internal struggles of being a better dad or better brother, family man, sister, just better friends, better person in your community. You don't have to, has nothing to do with traveling even. Like you don't have to go anywhere. It's probably mostly internal that we're all striving to overcome,
yes,
whether
I
we
love
want to
that.
be there or not.
That's a really good point. I would say the hero's journey is almost entirely turning inward.
Yes. Got those demons.
So where were you? What did your ordinary world look like?
Yeah, so I studied journalism in college and didn't love news reporting. Like I didn't really know what to do when I graduated because I knew I didn't want to be a news reporting or have like anything to do with the news or writing kind of stories in that way. And so I started just doing kind of sales jobs, like working in a clothing store. But I've always wanted to do something creative. So like I tried interior design, just like internship, and then I got into real estate with one of my best friends, Mo Hath. His father's a legend, John Hathorn, West Side closer in Los Angeles. And 2 years, I mean, we having a ball, like working with my best friend. It was amazing. And but I was definitely being called to something else. Like when I would travel, I knew that that made me happier than anything. And I started writing just poetry and kind of creative writing about not knowing what to do with my life, like not knowing what path to take. And I just remember distinctively, that's a word, sitting in Malibu, like on this cliff and just looking out, and wrote up a first poem just about uncertainty and not knowing which direction to go in and feeling drawn to something and just having no clue what to do. And so worked in real estate for 2 years, and I got scared when like older people in the real estate game, because when you're in it, for back in the day, you'd be in it for till you die. Like there's so many people who are just because it's a business where you can put in as much as you want. Like you don't have to be hitting at the 9 to 5 every day. If you're successful, you could just kind of sit back and do as much as you want. And people were just talking about, you're building your career, you're just at the foundation. And if you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life, you have to grow, you have to kind of set the seeds for a lifetime of growth. And that just scared the shit out of me. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this forever. And like, I don't want to put effort into building the foundation of a business where I know I want to go elsewhere. I just don't know what to do. we were having fun living in LA, having a great time. But that important thing, your career, your job, the thing that you want to be creating, my foundation was shaky. Like it just was not holding me up, and I knew that like I wanted to put in serious time doing something else. And in the time like when I was supposed to be doing other stuff, I was working on my website just for fun. I was starting to write stories just after work and stuff when could have been prospecting or whatever. And so that was the ordinary world. Something always scared me too about being a writer, like a creative writer. I just didn't know, I didn't feel validated. Like in college, I never felt like I was a great writer. Like never did well in high school, English or anything. And in journalism, decent. Like, I had my moments, but I never felt a real calling to it. And I just realized that's because I wasn't writing about things I enjoyed. Um, so I was just like, even if I did want to be like a travel writer, like how am I going to do it? Like I have no experience. I just like to travel and I just like to write. I'm slowly discovering that, but that's where I was.
Yeah. Two things that really stand out to me in your share is that you were looking around at the air quotes successful people in that industry that you were in and realizing that you didn't want their life. That I had a very similar experience where I was working at a company and I looked at the CEO, the top dog, and I realized I did not want his life. Like there was nothing about that I wanted. So that's when I started to realize that the future I was currently aimed at was the wrong future.
Even as high as you could go wouldn't make a difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other part that really stood out is the self-doubt that I think all of us have in the beginning of who am I to do something else? Who am I to live this big adventure or do something different? Because we either don't see our skill or maybe we don't even have those skills yet. Those are going to come down the road when
Mhm.
we choose what path we want to start walking down and see what happens.
For sure. For sure. All right, bud. So this is the ordinary world. There's the internal struggles, there's the external struggles we're battling against. You're comfortable, but you're getting by. That's where most of us are. The second step is the call to adventure. Tell us about it.
Yes. Yes, you were there for the call to adventure.
Oh
This
yeah.
this is one of the most clear and vivid memories I have. I always wanted that lightning bolt moment where I suddenly knew what I wanted to do with my life, and that did not happen. What instead happened was the lightning bolt punch in the face of holy shit, I am living a life that is not my own. And you've heard this story, I'll make it really short. We were in Tokyo. We had just been out on the town for a wild night of karaoke. And the next morning, I woke up violently hungover. I was such a mess. I was a shell of a human. I crawled to the cafe of the hostel we were staying at. And the entire day, I just sat there. I was drinking green tea, trying to piece myself back together. And I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. And on this podcast, he talked about this woman named Bronnie Ware, a best-selling author who wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. She worked as a palliative care nurse, taking care of people as they were dying, and interviewed 500 of her patients about what their biggest regrets were on their deathbed. And when I heard these words, that the number one regret people have at the end of their life is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expect of me. That's when I just got punched in the face because I realized that everything I was doing, from the job I was working to certain behaviors I was engaging in, like none of it was me and what I wanted to do. It was all this mask I was wearing. And so the call to adventure came through being brutally confronted with my inauthenticity and the fakeness of what I was doing.
Hmm.
And in that moment, it was like a call to live the life that was true to myself. And it wasn't all sunshine and butterflies. It was definitely a harrowing experience that was quite terrible at the time, but that is, I think, part of the call to adventure. It's not always a fun call to adventure. Sometimes it's a wake up
No.
call to adventure.
Yeah, great point. Probably mostly. There's a green tea tornado just came in and swept you off your feet.
Yeah.
Destruction. So yeah, there's the what were the stakes there? So like tell us about what would have happened if you were to not heed the call.
Great question. The stakes were settling. It was settling for a life that wasn't my own, getting to the end of my own life and realizing that I had been living solely for other people. Their expectations were calling the shots, not what I cared about and my passions. And I mean, really, it was just living an entirely false life
Mhm.
and never getting to realize my own potential and become the person that I was meant to be. It,
And in that Tokyo cafe, what did you make a decision there, or were you just like, wow?
yeah, I made a decision that I was going to quit my job in finance. And this was probably bigger for me personally at the time. That's when I made the decision that morning. It was November, late November of 2019. I made the decision that I was going to go all of 2020 without drinking alcohol. I was going to do a year of sobriety and
The
dry up.
rash decision to dry up in one big karaoke night.
Yeah.
Gift that keeps on giving.
So that was me. That was the call to adventure. What about you,
Beautiful.
my dear friend?
Dear boy. Well, it was that's 2019. Yeah, it was COVID. Um, Beginning of COVID, moved back in with my mother in Malibu. I was living in West LA, but like you couldn't, just didn't want to be in a apartment. And so we were working remote. I was like just waiting off from real estate. I'm like, okay, you don't have to go in, like, it's kind of fizzling a bit, not putting that much effort in. I'm just like, just writing up a storm just about life. And I was there and I just realized I'm like, wow, okay, I'm really feeling it's been like a couple years since, I was started just to think about this. Like everything in my life, I feel like not everything, but maybe everything. It's been this just kind of snowball effect of learning about who I type of person I am, and it's kind of all culminated in these steps that are really seem pretty wild to me, but it kind of all came together. Um, Learned that my like great grandma was a novelist, and I like read both of her books just like really quickly beginning of COVID, and just like, wow, that's amazing. Like truly enjoyed them about like 1700s. And I was just reading a ton, really just like during COVID, passion for reading just exploded and just learning and read my great grandpa's uh, autobiography, Max Lerner on my mom's side. So I just discovered that like both like my mom's side is writers, and I got like really involved in that and just really interested. And I was just writing like essays about them and just my life and just started just writing about everything. And I was like, wow, okay. And we started talking about, this sort of stuff. It's beginning of COVID and what's gonna happen. I think I wanted to move to San Diego at this point. Was this already, yeah, we were talking about it
Yeah, I think so.
before that, and just had a great time and wanted to shake things up. And like if I'm gonna do this, like now is the time. I no reason not to. I know I don't want to be in real estate anymore, and definitely being called to give writing a go. Still didn't know what that meant, but I was gonna start by taking writing on Medium like really seriously to like become a blogger. And it was so the refusal of the call is the next step here, and this kind of blends into it. But I just was so nervous to quit and like tell Morgan and his dad that I couldn't do it anymore and I want to do something else. And I was just for days, I was just like depressed and sick because I just hate disappointing people. Like I've always had that where just if I'm like, it just makes me sick. Getting over it. I was like, well, I mean, still have that, but I was just a shell of myself. I just knew I had to do this, but could not get myself to do it. And so I was refusing the call, even though like it was making me sick, just the, being torn in both directions. And um I just realized it was time. It was time. Had the conversation with them. I was crying a bit, but it's, tears of joy. And they were so supportive. And then it was go time. Um, Time to embark.
Yeah. What stands out is how supportive they were of you. When in your head you were probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna hate me," catastrophizing what was gonna happen next.
Big time. It's always smaller than we think it's gonna be. People's reactions. And there's definitely gonna be that's not gonna be everybody. There's obviously gonna be backlash and people are gonna wonder what you're doing and think you're crazy, but it always I think that things always turn out for the best. Blow over with time and you gotta do what's right for yourself for sure.
Yeah. And people who really support and love you and want you to be happy, they if you express that you're miserable with what you're currently doing, they're gonna be excited that you have a path forward and that there's another option.
100%. And this is where it gets good. You're gonna once you take that step, make it and take it. You're gonna start meeting the people who are gonna lift you up, mentors. Things start rolling once you put your energy out there in that direction.
Yeah. And for me, the refusal of the call was very similar to you. It was just months of anguishing in that decision. Do I quit? Do I not quit? It was a battle between my heart and my head. It was my mind saying, it's COVID. You didn't get laid off. You still have a job. You should be grateful for it. And then my like heart and soul being like, fuck this job. We hate what we're doing. Like, I want to live a big life. I can't look at this goddamn spreadsheet anymore. Otherwise, I'm going to kill myself. Um, Not actually, that's a little deep. Um, but like, it was literally just this back and forth between, oh, you should be so grateful you have a job. And it's really not that bad, to what are we doing with our life? This is insane. Like, just quit, please quit. And yeah, that back and forth between the two. And it wasn't until I met the mentor, which is step 4 of the hero's journey, that things started to change.
You started to really shake up.
Yeah, shake and bake.
That's right. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and so this is, I think, a really interesting part is that meeting the mentor doesn't need to happen physically. It doesn't need to be
Right.
someone who actually knows you. You just need to know them. And it came about in my life as an online course. An online course that was normally a couple $100 was being offered for $1 during COVID because everyone was experiencing hardship. And this course was called Go for Your Win. It was created and hosted by Aubrey Marcus, who's been a huge mentor, inspiration in my life. And I started this in March of 2020. And like March, April, May, I used this course and what I was learning in it and the community I was building through the group that was a part of it. It was like thousands of people from all over the world doing this course together. And that gave me the fuel, the confidence, the courage, and an idea of what I wanted to do. And that allowed me to quit my job.
So that was your meeting of the mentor. And like you're saying, it doesn't have to be a physical mentor. Like I've honestly never really had like a writing mentor. Um, who I met in person. This is where it gets interesting. So books could be the best mentors, like Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, Beyond Order. Those books really set the foundation of just becoming a really he is all about embarking on a hero's journey, like facing the call to adventure and facing chaos. Mastery by Robert Greene was extraordinary. And I just want to read a quote from that. It's quite lengthy, so buckle up. At your birth, a seed is planted. That seed is your uniqueness. It wants to grow, transform itself, and flower to its full potential. It has a natural, assertive energy to it. Your life's task is to bring that seed to flower, to express your uniqueness through your work. You have a destiny to fulfill. The stronger you feel and maintain it as a force, a voice, or in whatever form, the greater your chance for fulfilling this life's task, in achieving mastery. What weakens this force, what makes you not feel it or even doubt its existence, is the degree to which you have succumbed to another force in life, social pressures to conform. This counterforce can be very powerful. You want to fit into a group. Unconsciously, you might feel that what makes you different is embarrassing or painful. Your parents often act as a counterforce as well. They may seek to direct you in a career path that is lucrative and comfortable. If these forces become strong enough, you can lose complete contact with your uniqueness, who you really are. Your inclinations and desires become modeled on those of others. This can set you off on a very dangerous path. You end up choosing a career that does not really suit you. Your desire and interest slowly wane, and your work suffers for it. You come to see pleasure and fulfillment as something that comes from outside of your work. You've broken contact with your destiny as formed at birth. And that's interesting. What just came up for me is you see pleasure and fulfillment as something that comes from outside of your work. And a big just mindset shift was, and something that I was grappling with was how am I spending the entire day, creating a business where you're also expected to work. This is in real estate outside of the 9 to 5. It's a 24-hour job, which really got to me as well. Like having the no shut off was not my style. It's not like that. And even if, even if you're not making money for a long time, even if your work is considered the thing that's not making you money, which is kind of is for me. That thing, I mean, if you're putting all you have into it, should give you a sense of fulfillment, even if people don't recognize it or see it as what you do. So the big moment for me was meeting the mentor was the books and just reading a ton about just history and about writing. And but also I started my master's degree in creative writing. And one of my mom's friends was like, he should get his master's like online during this. And that just can't believe I did it because it inspired me to write my book, Heirs of Youth. And in my first class, writer's workshop, it's in the book, which I have here. The whole like telling of my story and just the inspiration. Never met the professor or anything, and he literally changed my life. He at the end of the course, like his final comment from the wise sage, it's like and it was beginning of COVID. If you can write well through this time, you can write well through anything. The time has come to write your own story as you see it now. And that was just, it blew the top off of the whole operation. Because like, wow, I don't need like a ton of life experience to be a good writer. I don't even need any experience, like journalism or anything. Write your story as you see it now, as you see the world right now. It doesn't have to be perfect world. We could be in COVID, and this is the world that I live in, that we all live in. And that inspired me to just give it everything I had. So I started on my master's, and that was huge mentorship, just the whole process. I started a Medium mastery course, Tom Kugler on Medium, pretty much that you gotta, be posting every day, and how to grow a following on Medium, do that. And then serendipitously, I met this old man, just walking. It was like the most chaotic time beginning of COVID. There's barbarism in Los Angeles. People were pillaging the streets in like Santa Monica, where we hang out and grew up, like nothing you've ever seen. Just rioting and looting, and it seemed like the world was on fire. And I went for a walk like through Point Doom, and just this old man Alfred was just like sitting out looking at the sunset. And I was just like gonna walk past him, just like so much going on in my head. And like, you know what? It's like, say hi to this man, get into this conversation. And it was like we were kindred souls from different times. Like I was this young, aspiring student, and he was just this old sage. And we just talked about writing, about philosophy. And he pretty much told me to like get your credentials and actually like take it seriously. And um, you know, I just learned from that moment, it was like, wow, he's this old New Yorker. He's seen he's seen a lot of life. And if you could just be here appreciating the sunset, like at such a crazy time, which I don't even know if he's aware of, but anyway, it just brought everything to perspective. Like, you know, might as well go for it. Take his advice, get go, just embark. Like this is the time when everything around you seems to be crumbling. That's the time to go.
Yeah.
It's
Time to
kind of
go.
yeah, it's always been definitely a lot from books. Like we both love philosophy and just learning from the greats. And I mean, parents are definitely amazing mentors as well. They've done creative work and inspired me and supported me every step of the way. So that's been huge also.
Yeah. And I think one thing about the meeting of the mentor that is interesting is that just because you take inspiration from a mentor doesn't mean that you have to agree with every book they've ever written or every political view they hold.
For
Like for
sure.
me, that quote from Mastery that you read, that passage is amazing, and I love that. And yet, other parts of Robert Greene's literature just really grind my gears and seem way too Machiavellian for me.
Yeah,
And someone like Jordan Peterson, I love that man. Like he has given me so much fuel and inspiration and tools on my journey. One of our favorite quotes is, "You accrue incremental wisdom as you implement your flawed plan." That's from him. And I love his lectures and his teachings and his emphasis on the hero's journey. And yet he has some pretty conservative views that I don't agree with. And so you can you can pick and choose and pull from different people in your life to piece together your own like ideal mentor that you're learning from. I don't think it has to be one person that you fully accept and agree with everything they say.
for sure. I think maybe less and less it's becoming like you need to find like this is in like Tim Fair, I don't even know what's from, but The Third Door, like this book, Alex Benai, and it's like you have to find your mentor where like you're gonna be glued to them and go on like the exact same journey, like the shadow. First of all, most mentors aren't willing to take on like a mentee if they think that's what it's gonna be like. It I mean, from what I've read, so I've never had a mentor like that where it's like, this is who I want to be, and this is I would follow every word. It's take bits and pieces from people you look up to, and yeah, you definitely don't have to agree with everything. Um, Obviously, we're very different people, grew up in different times, and there's lots of wisdom to be found in people who have been there before, but also you got to pave your own way.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is crossing the threshold. So you found your mentor, and yes, I'd say we're at this point.
Yeah. Step 5.
You're embarking.
I'm embarking. This was the crossing of the threshold for me. Like that big moment was quitting my job. It was quitting my job without knowing exactly what I wanted to do next. The course Go for Your Win gave me the courage and the fuel to do it. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next, but I did know that it was going to involve helping other people. It was going to involve personal development, self improvement, all the stuff that had fired me up and I had been doing kind of on the side.
Hmm.
So this is a really big moment in my story because I remember telling my dad, who's this logical, rational, pretty risk averse human, that 50% of my plan was to have no plan. I had been very risk averse myself my whole life, like very careful and calculated. And I just had this feeling, this deep inner knowing coming from my heart and my soul that was I was going to be okay. I needed to do this, and if I was willing to cross that threshold and voluntary voluntarily put myself in the unknown, that everything was going to work out and be okay. And I think I'll leave it there and then kind of tie in the crazy serendipitous things that started happening in the next step.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, as the Buddha once said, fear does not prevent death; it prevents life.
So true.
Yes, it will. When you take that step, I believe the universe is in your favor. It's like it. The last like few weeks since I've been home, I've just kind of it's blown my mind a bit. I thought like everything's happening so fast, and I'm back from like this European excursion, and like moving to Japan in a month, and like I'm trying to piece it all together, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what the next step, I'm so excited, but I really do not know. All I know is it's gonna be okay. Like no matter what happens, when you're in that unknown, things will work out. Gonna be hard. Like there'll of course be difficult moments, and already has been, but it always gets better. So you gotta trust yourself and trust that things will work out.
Was crossing the threshold for you, that was quitting your real estate job?
Yeah, I would say quitting, going full into writing, beginning of COVID, and then yeah, moving to San Diego was kind of like new start sort of thing, starting the podcast with you. And that was I wrote, I mean, kind of random different thing, but um yeah, moving to San Diego, starting the podcast, that was like, okay, there's no going back. Everything I do, and I've had jobs like since then, but everything I do is gonna go towards like fueling this, passions, desire to somehow make this my life and career. And things are, it'll take time. Like, do the work that you want to do when nobody's watching. That's like what it comes down to, especially with writing. It's what are you actually doing when you're not getting noticed and clapped for? And is it something that you actually want to be doing, or are you doing it because you think some outcome is gonna change the way you feel now? Or um it's pretty much it was giving myself to something that really filled me up intrinsically, no matter if anybody ever saw anything or if I ever even make it. I know this is giving me more fulfillment and satisfaction than anything else, and meaning. And it's because I'm on the journey that it's kind of like, you know, I don't even know what I'm going with there, but it's because I'm on the journey that like I'm finding meaning. Like, just being when you're on it, everything will kind of start to make sense just to you, maybe not to everybody else, or maybe it won't make sense. What I'm saying now doesn't make much sense.
What I'm taking from all that is that you have to be on the path for certain things to happen. If
Mhm,
you're refusing the call and you're not crossing that threshold, there are certain things that could have happened that will never happen because you aren't putting yourself in that space of all of the potentials happening.
for sure. Yeah, it's kind of just a no going back mentality, and your whole being will change. Like you became a new person, but it's who you've always been. And same thing with me. Like we're just becoming better versions, not better, more authentic versions of ourselves in this.
Yeah. And wow, what you just said there, I think leads perfectly into step 6, which is tests, allies, and enemies.
Mm,
And this idea of you have to cross that threshold and put yourself out there for things to happen. I have a story for this. But
please.
part of crossing the threshold that you briefly mentioned was, yeah, us starting this podcast. It was, I still remember the call. You called me and you were saying you wanted to quit your job. I was saying I wanted to quit my job. And we were like, okay, let's do it. And let's create a podcast around like what happens next, where we document the journey, we talk about everything that's going on. And that was a crossing of the threshold for us because not only were we committing to leaving our corporate life, but we were gonna like create something to talk about it and hold each other accountable. And the story I want to tell about things happening because I crossed that threshold, one of the biggest allies in my life right now, someone who I definitely think of as a mentor. He refused to be my mentor when I first asked him, is Dane Sanders, who we mentioned earlier in the episode. But I was connected to him because we had a podcast called the Dare to Dream podcast. And he's the CEO of a company called Tell Me Your Dreams. And a girl from college who I hadn't spoken to in years randomly connected us via email and was like, hey, I think you guys should meet each other. You guys are both interested in dreams. And that was the only reason I met him. And he has become such a big part of my life. And so that really just emphasizes the fact that you have to take that first step. You have to start the journey for these crazy serendipitous things to happen and come together.
exactly. You can't imagine what's going to happen. Like you can't expect it or imagine it. You just got to go.
Absolutely.
Think about
And
like how things are going to work out. You just get stuck.
yeah, and another huge ally that has played such a foundational part in my story and my journey was Tim, who I met Tim because I had met my mentor through the Go for Your Win course. So I'm in this Go for Your Win course. There's people from all over the world participating in this. And Tim wasn't in that course, but there was a woman named Sabrina in that course who read an article I posted. She was doing something else on the side, which was a coaching program, and read the article I posted, thought of this guy named Tim in this coaching program she was doing, thought of me, and connected us. So there are two instances where I got connected to people who played a huge role in my life. I ended up starting the nonprofit with Tim, and that was such a big foundational part of my beginning. Both of those instances, meeting Tim, meeting Dane, I had nothing to do with. It was completely serendipitous, and it only happened because I crossed that threshold and I stepped into the unknown.
That's wild. I mean, yeah, the fact that Dane, and we should link to the episode with him because that was one of my favorites. You met him through like starting this podcast and
Yeah,
their dream. It's when when you follow your heart, put it out there, you start to get connected. The stars will align. It's
that's
gonna
when the crazy
might
things
take some
happen.
time, but yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, test allies, enemies. Of course, we're gonna face a lot of them. I'd say this is where I am now. Obviously you are my biggest ally. Don't know how get through this without you, the highs and the lows, but we're on it together. And if you could find somebody, you could really trust, and when you break down, help you get back up, it is everything. Love you, buddy.
Oh, I love you too. I'm feeling guilty that I didn't specifically call you out yet as an ally, but you've been there since day one. I mean, you have been my rock, my foundation. As
They're gonna be a
as
wedding vows.
these are my wedding vows. This is me proposing, by the way. Um, yeah, like that honestly, if I have advice to give, it would be find someone to go on the adventure with. And you don't necessarily need to go together. You can both be doing your own adventures, but you need someone there to console you when you are in pieces, someone to put you back together again
For
and just
sure.
share the experience because it's scary, it's intimidating, and kind of by definition, it's non-ordinary because you're
Right.
leading the ordinary world. So you're going to be by yourself at times, and having someone to lean on is essential.
For sure. So I think the innermost cave, that is the next thing. And I don't know if I've reached that yet. What about you?
So I didn't really speak to many tests. I'll just speak to that briefly and then answer your question. I think a huge test for me in step 6 was starting the nonprofit with Tim, doing that for a year and a half, like having this great thing that was helping kids and everyone was proud of me, and it felt like I had been successful in my shift from the corporate world to now, oh, I'm a nonprofit co-founder and I'm making the world a better place. The test there was I ended up being pretty miserable at the end. I was working too much. I was in San Diego. Our company was in Houston. I was barely seeing the students that we were helping. I was just burning out.
Yeah.
And the test was okay, here we are again, working too much, sad, like not liking what I'm doing. Am I
Hmm.
going to settle here or am I going to kind of, it felt like at the time, like throw it all away and start over again. And luckily that's what I did. I realigned. I realized that I loved the coaching aspect of what we were doing, not necessarily the nonprofit management piece. And I told myself, all right, like we've been here before, we know what to do. It's time to realign and step away from that. And I'd say that was one of the biggest tests I've faced, is just making another shift.
For sure. The decision to, yeah, exactly. Like, what is it? The sunk cost fallacy when you think, I can't leave this because I put in so much time and effort into it already. Yeah, you
Yes.
stay with it for the rest of your life and just keep spiraling. It's that was purely, I mean, it was an amazing thing you were doing, and it was purely a learning experience. And the biggest test was being able to step away from it to start something else. Like that was huge, and so you passed. You did great
As
work, but you knew when enough was enough, and definitely put in your time. And um, yeah, I'd say a test for me right now is just like, I'm still, we both are not making money that sustaining us in our jobs. Like, we're figuring it out as well. And it's just still finding peace in that things are going to work out and not knowing how it's going to happen exactly, but still following intuition, like this European just volunteering. And I learned just about who I am being out there and like realizing that. So I was in Europe for 3.5 months. Just worked at a hostel in Lisbon for 2 months. Sure, you listened to those episodes of Dare to Dream because they were riveting. And then I was on a farm in Calabria, Italy for 3 weeks, and that was so life changing. Just realizing how important it is to get your hands dirty and spend time in nature. Maybe not for everybody, but I realized how important it is for me, and just to be able to connect with the world. And even if like we were saying, this whole hero's journey, it doesn't even have to be for work, or it could just be a soul searching expedition to discover who you really are and why you're on planet Earth and what you want to do. And I learned a lot about that just being on the farm in nature with not a whole lot to do but right, and just kill cactus and battle myself. It was great.
I think that's a really good point, is that all 12 steps of the hero's journey could be done entirely. It might not look like on the surface anything's happening, but you could go through the entire 12 steps of the hero's journey uh, internally and,
Mm,
keep the same job, keep doing all the same stuff. It doesn't necessarily, your outer world doesn't necessarily need to change, but your inner world is where the battles are being fought and won.
that's right. Another so self-publishing Arrows of Youth, that was like, write the book. You did it as a writer. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Nothing changed, of course. I mean, little bit, just like I made me believe that I could do it. Like it was just a thing for me more than anything else. Like, I'm not making like a slightly more money from proceeds, but nothing really changes when you hit these milestones. And that if you're not doing the thing you're doing because it sincerely gives you something that you need to live, like it's life giving, it's not life taking, then it's just not going to be sustainable for the long haul. And it was just a thing for me of I needed to get this story out, and it was definitely. I remember calling you many of time, where just so frustrated with like putting the book together, and that is all part, like that is the place you want to be. It feels to actually have like a question that you're trying to answer, or just like to actually be pursuing something that's meaningful is such a gift. And if you can find that thing, don't take it for granted, and just that is where you want to be. When you get to the end of the line, you know, what you're all just gonna be thinking what's next. And that's a good thing. But it's it's about finding the life within you that is sustaining, and it's just inspirational fuel for the ups and downs.
That's a theme that's becoming more and more apparent the deeper I get into my own journey, is that you have to have that passion and desire to do it regardless of the outcome.
Mm,
Otherwise, you're just going to burn yourself out. If you're only doing something to try and achieve that end goal and it's not intrinsically motivating, you're screwed, because there's people out there who are intrinsically motivated to do the same thing you're doing, and they are going to beat you. They're going to outcompete you. And what you mentioned really resonated with me, of like, you wrote the book and not that much changed. I mean, I obviously liked you a lot more after you wrote the book. I didn't really like you before.
he's an author.
Yeah.
Every time we go out, you'd say that. It's good.
Uh-huh. And for me, that resonates a lot, because I finally got to the point where I am paying all of my like rent and expenses with coaching revenue. And yet the moment that happened, instead of celebrating that I hit that goal that I had set for myself, I immediately shifted into almost, maybe this was my approach to the inmost cave. It's probably not the biggest cave I'm approaching, but it immediately went to like, okay, I did this once. Can I do it again? And it was honestly this kind of spiral of like, I'm not good enough, which is wild to think about, that like hitting my goal would cause me to spiral, because as soon as I hit that goal, I was like, okay, great. Like I'm breaking even. And then I just started spiraling like, okay, I can't just break even forever. Like, what if I can't ever make more than this?
Mhm.
And then I immediately shifted the goalpost to like, oh, now I need to do this much more. And yeah, not a lot changed when that happened, besides the fact that I started panicking. And that is just, it speaks to why it's so important to be intrinsically motivated and passionate about what you're doing.
Mhm.
It brings to mind the story of Ryan Holiday. He, I think it was one of his first books. He finally made it to number one on the New York Times sellers list. And he tells the story. He's like, yeah, I was mowing my lawn and I got a call, and it was my agent saying, you did it. You're number one on the New York Times best-selling list. And he's like, it was great. Like I was excited for like a couple minutes, and then, I hung up the phone, and then I went back to mowing my lawn.
There we go. That's it.
That's
Yeah,
it.
that's it. It's the journey, baby. Journey's everything. We love it. So the innermost cave. So we've settled that score.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grappling with that now for sure. It's like the ups and
Yeah.
downs of, can I do this? Is this really gonna work out?
Mm.
Um, Especially like we're both kind of trying to do things that are really hard. I'm trying to be a coach. There's millions of coaches in the world. You're trying to be a writer.
There's none.
Everyone knows how hard it is to be a writer.
No writers.
And so, yeah, I would caveat with, I think I've reached the smallest, tiniest, innermost cave that is a false summit, and the larger one is out there ready to devour me in the future. But I will I will
I will be
face
your
it.
torch. I will be your torch. You'll be mine. Yeah. It's like for me, it's like I'm just thinking, so pretty much I have this book that's waiting to be written about Europe, and it's just daunting as all hell. Like I haven't really touched it yet since I've been home. And very nervous. I don't really know. Like it's just a big like I'm just like, damn, can I do that again? Like everything I put in the first book. That's one thing. And then moving to Japan, I've just been, having fun here and getting things done. And it's like I know I have to do this, and I'm so excited, but it's gonna be scary. It's gonna be scary just like missing my friends, family, and just being out there. And that's really gonna feel like crossing the threshold, but I just have no clue what's gonna happen. And that is all part of the journey. It's it's exciting.
Yeah, and it's iterative. Like you're going back, right, to cross another threshold, and then
Yeah.
you're gonna face new tests and enemies and meet allies. I guess we didn't talk about any enemies we've made along the way.
We made a few.
Made a few for sure. But what I would say to you is that fear of writing that second book,
Mhm.
that's a cave. And as Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
That's right. But no, I mean, I was just looking through like what because I pretty much have like every day in detail, and just looking through it, just I get like chills. Like wow, that just little story right there. Like there's so much that I want to write. That's like why it's daunting. Um, but yeah, of course, just gonna jump into it, and it's gonna be in Japan. I'll be right around Japan, and I have no clue how that's gonna look, but it's gonna be fascinating.
I'm
But
so excited to see that. I think the question I want to ask you as we wrap up here is, what is behind that fear? I mean, obviously it's daunting. It's a Herculean task to
mm,
combine all of these journal entries and experiences into a story. But if you had to get to the root of the fear, what do you think is there?
great question. A lot of things. Like first, that I don't know what kind of book it really is yet. Obviously, I haven't started yet, but like I'm like, is it just everything? Is it just this adventure story? Is it like I just don't know what it's gonna be until I start putting the pieces together, and that is daunting. Secondly, I have this. I just don't really know where to begin because this is what I had when I was writing Heirs of Youth. Like, I want to be consistent with like blogging and stuff, but what gets more importance? It's not really fear, but just can't really get over that hurdle. Like, am I going to be publishing like every chapter as I write it, or how to play that card? Of course, is it going to be good? Is anyone going to want to read this? Like, what am I even writing it for? It's just a kid who went to Europe for 3 months and just had fun. Like, what's the point? But I know there's a story there, and it is needing to be told because it is funny and relatable, and it's a big part of my life.
Yeah. Plus, I'm gonna like you a lot more once you've written 2 books.
2 books.
This is my buddy. He's written two
uh,
books.
it's great. Oh, well, bud, we'll just, hammer out the rest of the hero's journey, um, just to tell you what comes next. But there's the ordeal, which is, I imagine, you cross the threshold, you are in the other land, you are a Jedi at this point, and you face the ultimate test, Darth Vader, what have you. And of course, you defeat the bad guy, you exit the cave with the reward. This is important. The reward is what you learn from living an unordinary life. It's the wisdom gleaned from getting out there and overcoming the fear. And you bring that reward back to your ordinary world. Yet there are also challenges along the way. It's not an easy return. Reassimilating for me, I imagine, just one of the many problems that I'll face. Coming back from Japan and not knowing what the hell I'm going to do if that's the way it goes. Just like being in the United States, and just I could see myself going into a depression of like, I have no clue what to do now. I don't know what country to live in. I don't know who I am anymore. Didn't get anything done out there. That's just, that's a internal battle that there's always problems coming back home. But then there's the resurrection, second birth. You rediscover your love for life and you look back on everything that happened. And so, like you're saying, it's iterative, and this is all kind of it's a inflow outflow situation. But the hero returns with some sort of elixir to give to the people. So the journey is worth nothing if not shared, if not, you got to return with something. You've done something out there, and it has to be for more than just yourself, pretty much.
I think that's it.
Spark nuts.
I think that's perfect. And the resurrection, like part of that is you think you're past all the bad guys and the scariness, and yet the resurrection is also your final kind of dance with death as well. And
Yes,
it's a journey that keeps happening over and over again in different ways and different shapes with different people.
precisely, my friend. The resurrection could be the most important part, because that's the thing. No matter how many times you get knocked down, you gotta just keep getting back up, face that cave again, enter that thing, come out battered and bruised and smiling, crying.
Yeah.
Do it.
And
Do it.
I think the only thing I know for sure is that you are going to be there as my rock for every time I enter the cave and come out in pieces.
That's right, buddy. I'm just gonna just carry a stone in your pocket whenever you feel down. Way down metaphorically and physically. You think of me.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, before we get too lovey and emotional, we will end the episode there. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in with us today. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Anything else we want to leave you with? I hope this inspired you to embark. What's the first thing you got to do? What's the first thing you got to do? Is it notice the ordinary world around you and what can change? Have you already been called to adventure and you haven't answered the call? That's where most people, I'd say, are stuck. There's something inside you, don't know where to go. Fear does not prevent death, it prevents life. Buddha. Leave it
Boom.
there.
We'll leave it there.
Again. All right, y'all. Love ya.